hidden gem. And I think today we're going to be pleasantly overwhelmed by how beautiful nature is and the opportunities that we can get to actually take a little short left and actually go and get to know our country a little bit better. Now, without any waste of time, ladies and gentlemen, this morning we've got a lovely lady, Odette Curtis-Scott. She is the founder and director of the Overberg Renosterveld Conservation Trust and has spent many years fighting for the preservation of this ecosystem. In 2014, she received the Botanical Society of South Africa's Floral Conservation Awards in recognition of her work. Now, I don't want to take too much time. Odette, I'd like to hand over to you. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, John, and thanks for all of you out there who are attending. This is a little bit overwhelming because the only person I can see on my screen is myself and John, or the only people, and my talk. So here goes. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the Renosterveld ecosystems, why we value them, why we're looking after them, how we're going about that, and then also ending with a little bit of a background as to how the book came about and the journey that took us on. Okay, let's get this going. So starting off with a rather depressing picture, the warnings about the amount of habitat loss that is happening across the globe started many years ago. 200 years ago, Alexander von Humboldt, who was an incredible explorer in the time of Darwin, noted that the effects of the human species intervention were already incalculable. So 200 years ago, when impacts were minimal, ecologists were already crying out for some acknowledgement of this problem. More recently, still 70 years ago, again, before much of the change had happened here in the Renosterveld, Aldo Leopold noted that in parts of Mexico, South America, South Africa, and Australia, a violent and accelerating wastage is in progress. And yet today, this continues at unprecedented rates, and we feel quite powerless against it. We all know that we are sitting on the southernmost region of Southern Africa in a hotspot known as the Cape Floristic region, and within this region we find Renosterveld. So we are specifically talking today about this small region within the Western Cape known as the Overberg, and within the Overberg we're not even working across the whole Overberg. So what I'm going to show you today is just a small portion of this region, which we know as the Rooms, which comes from the Dutch word for ruggens or rolling hills. And this area is today what is known as the Overberg wheat belt. So we have seen that Renosterveld has borne the brunt of the plough on this extreme scale. The wastage that was talked about 70 years ago is here in full force. And it's hard to imagine when we look at the landscape now that 300 years ago, it all looked like this. It was covered in a wealth of botanical diversity, as well as an incredible wealth of animal diversity, most of which has been lost today, particularly the large megaherbivores. So the blowbook is extinct. Oopsie, sorry, I don't know what happened there. The blowbook is extinct. The black rhino is extinct locally. Big predators such as lion, mostly extinct from the area, certainly lions are, and we nearly lost the bontebok completely. So the ecosystem changed significantly when these animals were removed and then replaced with livestock, which of course have a very different grazing regime and generally tend to be very selective. So that started to change the ecosystem quite substantially. And then it became viewed as a wasteland and better use. It was considered more useful if it was put under the plow. So we started to lose it physically. And today, this is all that remains. So what we can see here is the 4 different types of Renosterveld that we find in the Overberg. The western, central, and eastern Rhones shell Renosterveld, and then these little pink pieces are a naturally fragmented type called Rhone Silkreed Renosterveld, found mostly along the Breda River and east of there. So the areas, the white areas which I've excluded from this map are the mountain fynbos areas and the coastal Strandveld areas that don't have Renosterveld in them. So this was the natural extent of Renosterveld, and the darker areas within that are the areas that are remaining. And you can see from this also that most of these are along watercourses and rivers. So the picture now is very sad. Less than 5% remaining is the current estimate. It's severely fragmented, and as I mentioned, there are 4 distinct vegetation types, which means that essentially that although they all look very similar, the endemics and the rares that you find in the west, you won't find in the east, and vice versa. So very high levels of endemism within this system. And what remains, as if that wasn't a problem enough, just being fragmented, are threatened by all these other compounding influences that are happening in the landscape. So the edge effects, of course, with all the herbicide and pesticide spraying in the surrounding area. Fire regimes, what we've seen often is either too little fire or too much fire. Alien vegetation, threatening some of the watercourses particularly. The unlawful, illegal ploughing of virgin land is a major threat still, despite the fact that most of what's left is pretty useless for agriculture. Overgrazing is a very, very big threat to these systems, and the destruction and channeling of watercourses. So all these are still happening in the landscape despite its threat status. So people always ask to start with what is Renosterveld, and I think the first thing that to understand is that it has this superficially homogeneous appearance. It has the appearance of a grey, drab shrubland, which is why so many people have undermined it. It's fragmented, surrounded by a matrix of monoculture, and it's subjected to a large array of threats, as I mentioned, which add to its rather sad appearance. So superficially, it doesn't have much going for it. Compared with fynbos, where you see all these showy, beautiful proteas and ericas often throughout the year, there's always something flowering and something attractive in fynbos. Renosterveld is not nearly as showy as its cousin, considered the ugly sister, and therefore overlooked, under-conserved, and understudied for many, many, many years. But it's also one of the richest Mediterranean ecosystems on Earth, and it's considered the richest bulb habitat on Earth. But as you all know, this incredible diversity of gems is really mostly apparent during spring, and particularly in burn sites after spring, the first spring or the second spring after a fire is normally the most impressive time to see Renosterveld in its full glory. And of course, this doesn't happen very often. So again, if you don't physically get down on your hands and knees and see what's going on in the system, you may miss out on a lot of information and a lot of the gems that you would otherwise be able to enjoy there. So despite its horrendous fragmented state, Renosterveld has an incredible diversity of botanical, insects, birds, even some mammals and reptiles still hanging in there. So I'm just zooming through a couple of pictures. This is an amazing Morea atropunctata, listed as critically endangered, found on only one site in the Overberg, and that's its only population. Buffoni, beautiful hoofball, these little gibeums which grow on quartz patches, these lovely nemesias which are common but beautiful annuals, particularly common after fire. The lovely Aristea biflora, also listed as endangered. The spider orchid, not very common in Renosterveld, but we occasionally find it. It's more a fynbos species. This lovely silene with a hoverfly pollinating. This gorgeous jewel beetle, occasionally seen if you're lucky. One of my favorites, the family of flies, the pollinating flies. This is one of the needle nose flies. Some really gorgeous moths. I mean, I'm just showing you a few of the images taken in the veld over the last years. The sunbirds play a very important role in pollinating several species, including this chasmanthe and the microlomas. It's a lovely little bee fly, hugely diverse family of flies occurring throughout the world. Also one of my favorites. This one I took recently on a BioBlitz. This is a woolly bee fly. It's another hoverfly on a endangered chrysanthemum. This is a crab spider, a spider that's able to change its color and waits for pollinators to come and feed on flowers, and then grabs them and uses them and eats them basically. This is a monkey beetle, one of the most important pollinators in the system. Here you can see it covered in the purple pollen of this Tritonia. Little weevil, just to give you an idea, that thing is the size of my pinky finger, which is extremely small. The little solitary bees, one of the proboscis flies, also important for pollinating. A lovely velvet spider. Several reptiles still are occurring in Renosterveld, cordylus lizards, a couple of tortoise species, ungulates and putloopers mostly, and then this beautiful harlequin snake. This lovely sand lizard, which we photographed recently on a BioBlitz. This to me looks like a little baby Komodo dragon, quite an incredible animal. This lovely southern keiko, pygmy shrew, elephant shrew. Several mammals, which some are common, like the striped field mouse and the duiker. On the left, we have the aardwolf and the aardvark. Both species have taken a serious knock as a result of all this habitat loss. And but we have caught aardvark on camera several times on camera traps. Aardwolf, that is. Aardvark only once at our reserve at Harvest Cliff. We've seen them. And I suspect the species has taken a serious knock, is probably almost extinct from the ruins because of all the fragmentation and loss of active termite mounds in which they are completely dependent. Fall rebok are still quite common in the landscape. And then the bird that brought me here to do this work was the black harrier. I spent 7 years working on them. And this bird is very dependent on large, intact Renosterveld and fynbos remnants. Less than 1,000 mature birds, the estimated population of this species now. It's jumped up to endangered on the red list. One of the species that we are the most concerned about. And the southern black korhaan, also a species that was common in the past and has whose populations have plummeted over the years for reasons that aren't quite clear, but it's no doubt linked to habitat loss because they are also dependent on natural habitats for breeding and feeding. So I've painted a rather bleak picture, but also one that shows that this ecosystem, despite how little is left, is worth preserving. There is an incredible amount of diversity intact within the system. And I started the Overberg Renosterveld Conservation Trust in 2012, so 8 years ago. And we have 3 main areas of focus. The first is education and awareness, particularly with regards to landowners, because they are our most important stakeholders. They are the people who will decide the future of this ecosystem. They hold its future in their hands. And our focus, therefore, is on working with them and building relationships with them. Landscape conservation refers to our efforts to link through these threatened remnants to one another through corridors to protect them and assist with their management. And then research Not necessarily something that we do ourselves extensively, but we work and collaborate with universities in an attempt to answer some of the many, many questions we have related to Renosterveld ecology and management. But we are literally a team of between 2 and 4 people, 2 of us on the ground at this point in time. And then the rest of our team helps with does the office management and the management of our research centre and guest house. So it's a little bit of an overwhelming task to have taken on this entire landscape and try to save it from this extinction spiral that it's currently on. But I'm just going to share with you some of the initiatives that we are undertaking. So back to this map, which shows you again the 4 different vegetation types, and then within the Overberg wheat belt. Some challenges associated with this environment are that if you were to count those remnants individually, there are over 5,000 of them. Of course, some of them are really small and probably insignificant in terms of the amount of ecosystem process they support, but possibly still very significant in terms of the biodiversity value they still hold, especially when it comes to plants. It's a large operational area, and if you again look at the individual remnants and measure each and look at the size of each one, less than 50 of them are over 100 hectares in size. So although we can connect areas, and there are very few where we can do this, but we can connect areas to create larger reserves or remnants that together would make up several hundred hectares together. But it's not, there are not a lot of opportunities like that left. And then, as I mentioned, the challenge of working in these 4 different vegetation types means that you also need to work across the landscape. We know there are higher levels of endemism. You can go from one remnant and to another just next door on the neighboring farm or on a different aspect or different vegetation type, and you'll find a whole suite of different species. So that basically comes down to the usual story that every bit counts and every bit matters. So we started off looking at this picture by essentially identifying some priority clusters where we focus our efforts to try and first of all secure the largest connected remnants in each of these veg types, but without looking away or turning away from any other opportunities that come up within this area that we work in. I'll start with one of the earlier initiatives that we undertook was here in the eastern Roontjie Renosterveld, just north of De Hoop. De Hoop lies just below this. And this is at our reserve called Haarweskloof Renosterveld Reserve. Haarweskloof is the old name of the farm, so we kept it. It's the first lowland Renosterveld Reserve to be established. It's about 500 hectares, 70% of which is virgin land, and the other portion is lands that were previously ploughed but are returning in terms of their cover. And this reserve was purchased by WWF in 2013 and given to us, to the trust, to manage. Haarweskloof is special for many reasons. It's got breeding black harriers. It's got an array of plants, over 600, I think we're close to 600 species now for the reserve, and several plant species discovered to date on the reserve, several new ones, many of which are endemic only to these special quartz patches that you see there in the photograph, which occur on the outcrops of eastern Roontjie Renosterveld. We saw an opportunity here to make use of the farmhouse that kind of came with the whole reserve. This was a rundown building that was literally had a tree growing in the wall and was going to waste. And we decided to do a crowdfunder in 2014, which went very well. And we raised the funds to restore the house and turn it into a research center where postgraduate students could come and use it as a base for their fieldwork, and also where visitors could come and enjoy the space and learn more about Renosterveld. We have since also developed a little guest house in the neighboring building, and we are in the process of raising funds to convert the last building that's on the property, which is a big old barn, which we want to convert for additional accommodation so we can accommodate school children and other groups in future. Our research questions that we would like to see answered focus on the use of fire and grazing in Renosterveld, the possibility, well, the high possibility and the extent of the extinction deaths that are occurring there, meaning that we are still seeing more loss more loss in terms of ecosystem process than we can measure to date, and especially focusing on pollination webs and understanding what our pollination webs even look like and how they've been compromised by fragmentation and what we can do to mitigate for that, if anything. Our biggest program, the program that we put the most resources into, is our conservation easement program. This would not be possible without the donors that support us, particularly WWF, in terms of a specific program. This was inspired by Cape Nature Stewardship Program, which is the sort of the champagne program of the whole deal, in terms of the fact that landowners, where Cape Nature is able to, landowners can actually declare their land a nature reserve. This is something similar, but it's not signed off by the minister, it's not signed with government, it's only signed with the trust. And what this does is it enables landowners to sign a voluntary conservation servitude which is attached to their title deed in perpetuity. This means that we can formally conserve these habitats, and also because of the landowner's long-term commitment, we can use our resources, or the resources we get from donors, to help the landowners actively manage their veld so that it doesn't actually cost them. And that is the incentive for them to sign with us. At this moment in time, we have close to 3,000 hectares signed up on our program, and we have about another 700 in the pipeline, which we hope to sign by the end of the year. So this means that this process also capacitates landowners to become veld managers and enables them to leave a legacy. And this is the whole point of this program, really, is to make sure the veld is safe for future generations. So how do we do this? What easement process do we follow, or what process do we follow to secure these easements? We start off with engaging with the landowner and undertaking field surveys and what we call bioblitzes on their land where possible. So we start with looking at the plant diversity, and when time allows and we can get our colleagues to assist us from other parts of the Cape, we undertake these bioblitzes where we try and measure and record not just the plants but everything else that we find on the property in terms of the wildlife. And we give this feedback, we always feed back to the landowner and report back on what we found with a colourful, personalised report which emphasises the rares and specials that we found, and is sort of the first step towards opening their eyes to what is actually in their veld, that it's not just this grey drab shrubland, that there's actually more to it and an incredible amount of diversity. We use this to build the relationship with the landowner and to gauge their attitude and their openness to conserving, to kind of feel out when it's the right time to start negotiating for an easement. This can be within weeks of meeting the landowner, or it can be within years of meeting the landowner. It all depends on how receptive the landowner is to conservation. We then start to negotiate, and when we've negotiated and we've signed an easement, if successful, then we assist with what we call NRM, Natural Resource Management, after signing. And this can take the form of alien clearing, where they've got aliens infesting their watercourses in particular, ecological burning, so assisting landowners with burning at the ecologically correct time of year, so late summer, early autumn. Sometimes it involves putting up a fence so that they are able to control livestock access to the veld, and also some watercourse management and erosion control where possible. So these are some of the interventions that we are able to assist landowners with, and the idea really here, as I mentioned, is that we do this for them in a way that it doesn't cost the landowner a lot of money. Sometimes the landowner contributes. For example, we'll buy the fencing material, he'll buy the labor, pay for the labor costs. Other times he will make the fire break, but we bring in a team to actually do the fire or the burn. So it just depends on the situation and the management priorities that we identify in the management plan. And then our field guide to Renosterveld, which I think most of you who are watching today already are familiar with. And this was a major a wonderful tool for us that we've been able to give to landowners or sell to landowners. The Botanical Society kindly donated 40 copies that we could give to farmers that we are working with. And I'm happy to say we've already donated all those copies to farmers who were really deserving of them. So that tells you something about the increasing number of landowners in this landscape that we are working with. How many farmers are opening up to this idea of Renosterveld. There's not just Bossieveld or Eetvelgrond or Renosterbosveld. There's actually a whole lot more to it. And this book has been a wonderful tool for us to show them this, with over 980 plants, 140 animals, some management guidelines, lots of ecological information and information on red listing and conservation issues and challenges, and some of our farming champions are also highlighted in the book. The journey for the book, people always ask me this, how long did it take and how did it start? It started with an idea in the very early days of the trust. I think it was around the time of one of our very first board meetings that Sean Privet and I were talking about how amazing it would be to have a field guide to Renosterveld. I was really struggling. I'd been trying to teach myself these plants. Coming from the bird world, it was all quite overwhelming. And we said, sort of half joking, half serious, let's write a book one of these days. And we kept thinking about it and chatting about it, and eventually we invited a small group together and had our first co-author meeting in November 2015. We were already by then engaging with Struik, who were very happy to take the project on, and with the support already then also of the Mapula Trust, which paid for the development and publishing of the book. And we formalized our contract with Struik in July 2017 and launched in 2020. So it's altogether a process of about 5 years. The first steps to this book were probably the most difficult ones, because I had, being a non-botanist and sort of fumbling my way around a bit, had often just focused on taking pretty pictures of pretty plants and ignoring a lot of the more strange and obscure or common things. So we realized at that point, a lot of us only knew things to genus level and couldn't say offhand, couldn't come up with a nice list of, say, 800 or 1,000 plants of what we were sure needed to go into this book. For example, Helichrysum, it's a huge genus, they're common, they're all over the place. Now we needed to narrow down this list to something manageable for the book. So we started with the Précis database, which was several thousand species. and we tried to cut that down using GIS to include only those in the wheat belt. And that even then only reduced to a few thousand, so that was still too much. So then it was a matter of working through the list and taking out what we knew had crept in there from fynbos but wasn't really Renosterveld, or what we had not yet encountered in Renosterveld. And then, of course, then starting with that as a starting point. Then taking all the different genera and dividing them amongst all the authors, so 6 of us all together. Rhoda McMaster, who is an absolute superstar with bulbs in particular. Rhoda and her late husband Cameron did a lot of bulb monitoring, especially in the Napier area, but all over the country. And Rhoda took on all the iridaceae and anything else basically with the bulb, hyacinthaceae and so on. Then Charlie Sturton, who's he's from South Africa originally, but lives in Bath in the UK. He is a legume specialist, so he took on all the legumes, huge family for Fabaceae, and a few other stray families like Theseum, the genus Theseum, Caryophyllaceae, a few other genera. Sean Privet came mostly from a fynbos background, and so he took on a lot of the genera that overlap quite substantially with Renosterveld and between Renosterveld and fynbos. So the few the buchus and the ericas and the couple of proteas that we have, and a few other strange and obscure groups. Mike Goulding is a retired school teacher living in Greyton. Mike's a very keen photographer, passion for the fynbos and for detail, and he helped us with some of the strange and obscure groups that we needed to figure out. Nick was a lifesaver in that he came in and helped us figure out all the strange Asteraceae and a few of the other weird and obscure and difficult groups that we often overlook. And I took on the Azoraceae, which are the mesems, the feiches, and several other groups. And yeah, that was quite challenging because most of these things we needed to confirm with IDs with specimens. So the next steps were to get into the field. Once we had a starting list to work from, was to get into the field and see what are we missing, what do we need IDs for, what have we found that wasn't on the list that we need to confirm IDs for. So looking at strange things like Asteraceae, the daisies, which are a massive family, and things like Apiaceae, the carrot celery family, so notobubons and things, and trying to figure all of those out. So quite a challenge, suddenly needing to go from focusing on all the wows and pretties and spectacular things to the more common species which we had been overlooking in the past. The Azoraceae are a really difficult group, the feiches. For example, this page shows all pink flowered Azoraceae, all different species and genera. So quite challenging, and the only way the idea of these could be confirmed was specimens, often a combination of specimens with the seed capsules or the fruit capsules and the photographs, to be sure. And Cornelia Cluck at UCT, Compton Herbarium, was extremely helpful with sorting out all this. Same applied to this difficult group, but one of my favorite groups, the geophytic pelargoniums. So meaning this is a group of pelargoniums which are in fact bulbous. Basically, they have a corm underground, and they grow from this. They grow their leaves, which, as you can see in the bottom left-hand one there, can be 2 different forms of leaf on the same plant, as in this Pelargonium caledonicum, which is critically endangered. But the difficulty in identifying pelargoniums is that many of them have very similar leaves, and they drop their leaves before they flower. So I ended up collecting something of each species, getting it to flower in a pot, and to make sure that we've got the correct leaves and flowers matched up for photographs. So that was quite challenging. Then the taxonomic nightmares which we had to deal with. We thought, collect and send to experts, it'll all be easy, we'll just get names and that'll be that. Well, the number of times I had to hear, sorry, I can't ID those from photos, I need better specimens because I need to look into the ovaries of the flower or something along those lines. Or this genus is a mission, it's a nightmare, it's a mess, it's in 30 years overdue of a revision, for a revision. So that I heard quite often. Or it's most likely an undescribed species, but I can't really be certain without more material or until the genus is revised, which might take another 10 or 15 or 20 years. So yeah, and we didn't want to leave these things out of the book, so we actually ended up putting them in and just making it clear that the species hasn't yet been identified or doesn't yet have a description or is busy undergoing taxonomic review or description, because we didn't want to exclude things which people may find in the veld. Then we also had to choose animals, because at this stage Struik was saying to me, you have a lot of plants, this is a big fat book, now you want to include all these animals too. And I felt strongly that we needed to do this, because this is a book that we are aiming at the farmer as well and the layperson, not just botanists and naturalists. And because of this, I wanted to remind them of the diversity, that it extends well beyond the flora. And so we selected something from all the animal groups, a suite of species from all of them, and just to give you a sort of a sample of what you can find in the system, but this is by no means complete at all. We also had wonderful artists draw some illustrations for the book, so that we could make reference to the drawings showing important features of the plants, the differences, for example, between Geyseriza and Hesperantha, which is always something I often still need to go back and remind myself which one's which, where do the stigmas come out in this one versus that one. Or with Fabaceae, there's always reference to the keel and the standards and the wings and the calyx. Where are all these things on the flower, so that you can make sense of the description. And so we had this wonderful artist do these drawings for us, which I think are quite beautiful. And then eventually, when we were ready, we submitted all the raw material to Struik, so all the photographs and the pages and pages of writing. Of course, this went through several checks, several edits, and I just want to say Struik were absolutely phenomenal. What an amazing team to work with. They were efficient. They were so patient with my constant need to change things and update taxonomy and add another species or add a better photograph. And they were so excited about this book from the beginning to the end. And it was really a privilege to work with this publishing company. Even after spring 2019, which was only like 6 months before the book was due to go to print, they still let me squeeze in another 20 species that we had found that spring. So this shows obviously that nothing is ever complete. This work will never be complete, and even this spring we are adding a whole lot of species to our list for the next edition. So the book was released just in time for spring, the end of August, and if you haven't got it yet, just remember Struik is running a special on the book this week still for those who have participated today. So I just want to share with you the lessons that we have learned as a trust and as an organization working with landowners, because I think these are really important things to remember for those of us working in conservation across the globe, actually. There's a lot of talk about conservation and values, and there is such pressure on us as ecologists to seek ways in which to justify our crusade. And there's enormous pressure from the economic side of things, we feel the need to place an economic value on everything that we do, on everything that we're trying to preserve and conserve. So the big buzzwords that are thrown around are ecological infrastructure, process, all these things that we can somehow attach a monetary value to. And these definitely have their place. They are very important arguments. But we need to be careful that we don't push this argument so much that when a system is as degraded as it is in the wheat belt, it may no longer be performing those ecosystem processes or services, providing that ecological infrastructure. And we need to remember that there are other, much more important even, values that we should never be overlooking. And in Renosterveld, it's very difficult to argue ecosystem services. Most of the water that goes through the system is brackish. We've got the Sout River as one of our main rivers in Renosterveld. Brackish, salty water can't be used for farming. There isn't enough water to use for irrigation, so most of our water is, most of our salt water or fresh but brackish water systems that flow through the landscape are not valued from a water provision point of view. Pollination, we're bringing in bees in hives to pollinate canola. We're not using natural pollinators. There aren't enough of them left. There aren't enough in this landscape. So it's a very altered system where arguing for ecosystem infrastructure falls a little bit flat. And I feel very strongly that this argument anyway doesn't work with farmers in this region. This is a region that is so altered and transformed that we need to make people see the value of this vegetation for other reasons. And I believe it's about making people feel something in their hearts, as sort of soppy and cheesy as that might sound. It is about pulling at heartstrings. The way we have won over all these landowners that we are working with today is through showing them what they have and getting them to fall in love with it. So the real reason that landowners have come on board with us is, here's a few examples. Philip van Niekerk, who signed the ongegund easement in the Western Ruins. I've been working to improve my Renosterveld for 50 years. It is now becoming clear that the impacts of years of misuse of the earth and the natural resources are being exposed. I hope it's not already too late. Another wonderful farmer, Joshua Himan, who was actually one of the very first farmers to sign with us, says that for many years, and this is directly translated from Afrikaans, the veld was in our eyes worth nothing and just in our way. You taught me and made me realize how special and unique the veld is. Plants, animals, birds, and everything. It is an important mind shift that we all need to make. MG Lotte, our very first easement. For years, I believe my veld had no value when compared to my production lands. I only saw it as a resource to exploit for some limited grazing. I have since understood how unique and special this veld is, and I've committed to looking after it, to the point where I'm not even sure that I will ever put my sheep in it again. And then Matthias Streicher from Eetvlucht. I want to help conserve the Renosterveld because it is the only true pieces of Renosterveld left to go to for a Sunday picnic or veldbraai, and at the same time feel part of Africa. Isn't that amazing? So I think that this is something to bear in mind. This is our whole success, our stories of success, the continuing relationships that we are building with farmers and new farmers is based on relationships and on sharing knowledge and showing them what they have. We make sure our researchers feed back to farmers. They give them feedback on what they found, anything special, anything unusual they may find on their land. Feedback all the time. That is how you win people over. So I'd like to part with this last quote by John. Oopsie, sorry, I've now gone forward when I wanted to go back. Basically to say that a society is defined not only by what it creates, but by what it refuses to destroy. And I'd like to end off with that passing thought. And I just want to, apologies for this, I just want to go to the end here. That was my last slide. That is my little girl. She's now a lot bigger than that, 2.5. But I think when you are privileged to bring a child into this world and you already feel so strongly about conservation, it becomes even more apparent how urgent and dire and important the situation is that we're faced with today. There really is a lot more that we can do, and we need to keep doing it. And I just want to end by thanking all our donors. Our work is entirely dependent on donations, being a non-profit, and we owe our success to the people that have stood by us and believed in us on this very long and difficult journey. Thank you all for joining. Really appreciate it. Thanks, John.
Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Dr. Odette Curtis-Scott, founder of the Overberg Renosterveld Conservation Trust. What an amazing, amazing talk, Odette. Wonderful presentation. The pictures are vibrant. You've just taken us on a journey that we are all longing for. And I think when we opened up the session this morning, we said, we are all faced by a deadly pandemic, and we are all affected by this deadly disease. But equally, we have an opportunity, especially during these quiet times when the borders are still kind of tight, for all of us to stay safe, but equally take a little short left and literally take a small drive. I mean, when I look at it, it's literally 87 kilometers from Cape Town. That's literally under 1 hour, 10 minutes drive to go to Renosterveld and enjoy the nature reserve in the manner that you've presented. So thank you very much. Without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I know we are just about an hour into the talk. I just want to make a quick mention that this wonderful book that has been presented to us by Dr. Odette, it's available at Kirstenbosch Bookshop. And everybody that has joined us today, and actually for this whole week, we are giving away 15% off this beautiful book. I think this will make a wonderful Christmas gift to someone. I think anybody that's looking to take a little quick shot left, will be willing to get this book and actually go and do the shot left to Renosterveld with this book. So we're giving away 15%. It's available until the end of the week. If you'd like to make inquiries, or you're unable to get to Kirstenbosch, please drop us an email. It's been left on the comment sections below, but just for the sake of everybody that's still with us, gregory@botsoc/kirstenbosch.org.za. That's the email address that you can email to be able to secure this book if you're unable to make it this week. If you drop us an email, we'll make sure that we keep a copy for you and make sure that you get that 15% discount. Now, before I wrap up the show, Odette, we've had an amazing response all over. I mean, we are inundated by questions and comments. I'm just going to read a few quickly for you. We've got Ms. Way Jones, who says, asking a question to us saying, is conservation assessment a national practice or only tried in the Renosterveld? How successful is it? How do you gauge this success? I don't know if you want to take us through that quickly, Odette. Let me read it one more time. Is conservation assessment a national practice or only tried in the Renosterveld? How successful is it? How do you gauge this success? Okay,
the EASEMENT program. Okay, so how successful is that? It's still in its early stages. We signed our first easement about 4 years ago now. It is something that we are basically pioneering, but the legal framework for it was developed within WWF, and we are using the template that was just developed there. There are other organizations looking at following a similar model, including the EWT, the Endangered Wildlife Trust, BirdLife's also exploring it, I believe. And I think other landscape initiatives have called us for advice and are looking into it. I think in terms of success, well, we currently measure the success by the number of hectares and the number of landowners that have signed up for it so far. At the moment, we are on 11 sites, which together make up 3,000 hectares. Hopefully by the end of the year, that will be closer to 4,000 and about 15 sites. It's a much more cost-effective way to build relationships with landowners and secure the land, because of the funding that we currently have, we are able to offer the landowner an incentive upfront, so a commitment upfront to undertake certain management interventions on their farm for them and cover those costs. It builds the landowner's capacity to become more of a conservation manager and to build the management of their veld into the management of their whole farm. And so that is the way we measure it right now. In terms of whether it's been challenged yet legally or not, that's another discussion. But in terms of the tools that we have available and being able to secure small remnants in a very transformed landscape where the remnant only forms a small portion of the farm, this is the best tool that we currently have available, and we think it's working very well.
Awesome, awesome. I've got Jackie Bedenhorst, who's also asking about the easement program. Is there anything similar happening in the Karoo, perhaps? Do you know?
I don't know. I do know that the EWT was exploring it in the Karoo for river and rabbit areas, possibly, but I don't know of any other initiatives in the Karoo at the moment other than that.
Oh, awesome. Christy Bragg says Odette's passion from Renosterveld for the Renosterveld conservation is inspiring. So keep it going. Helen Temple on Facebook says, so awesome to hear about the Renosterveld book. I'm sure we'll be getting an email definitely from Helen. We also have, let me see, Rolin Theron says, hi everyone, excited to hear about the work of the Conservation Trust. Keep it up, Odette, keep it up, keep it up. We've got Cherry Dirk who says, good morning all. I am Cherry, a PhD student from UCT. I'm so excited. So we've had an amazing response on social media. I mean, we've got shares on Facebook. You know, our Facebook page has reached over 300 people and it's going strong. And, you know, this talk is going to remain on our social media pages for a while. So Odette, you know, there's just so many things. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you who's participated in this talk, who's shared a comment, who's shared a like, you know, posted, you know, showing us thumbs up. All the beautiful contributions that everybody has made, only positive comments, and I would sit here literally for the next hour just to go through all the comments. So in wrapping up the conversation this morning, ladies and gentlemen, just to quickly remind you that this book is available at the Kirstenbosch bookshop. Please go on and like the Struik Nature Facebook page. Go ahead and like the RoomToGrow Facebook page, the Renosterveld Conservation Facebook page, as well as the Kirstenbosch. These talks are brought to you by Struik Nature, RoomToGrow Garden Landscape, and Kirstenbosch National Botanical Garden. It has been an absolute pleasure having you, Dr. Odette Curtis-Scott, with us this morning. You've really, you know, brought so much joy to our hearts, and I'm sure a lot of us that are currently still tuning on Zoom, we are thinking about taking this short left and visiting you at the conservation there, just to go and check it out. I think it will be a real treat. Ladies and gentlemen, if you really want to go and visit the Renosterveld Conservation, make sure you get yourself a copy of this book, as we've mentioned. Go through it and then go and enjoy this beautiful country of ours. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is John, and it's been an absolute pleasure to welcome each and every one of you. Thank you to all the team at Struik Nature RoomToGrow, who's put this wonderful talk together. Belinda, thank you at the background together with your team. Odette at Overberg together with your team, thank you so much for giving us this privilege, an honor of just sharing this wonderful information with us. Ladies and gentlemen, until we meet again, please stay safe. Remember to sanitize. Make sure you have your face mask on. But most importantly, let's start living. Let's go out and visit this wonderful Renosterveld Conservation Nature Reserve. Ladies and gentlemen, it is all from me. Make sure you like our social media pages and keep well and stay safe. Thank you so much. Odette, have a wonderful day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks, John.
Yes, have a good one. Bye, everyone. Take care of yourselves.